How are you, Dan?
Morning, John. How are you, mate? That top eight's getting interesting, especially that battle for 8th spot now with 5 teams going for it.
So what's going to happen is the Dragons will win this week against the Eels, lose the next week, still be in the 8, play the Bulldogs first, and then win if they continue with their current form.
Very positive outlook.
It's win-loss, 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 win-loss.
Look, I know some people in the media seem to be giving up on the Dragons in light of what happened against the Sharks the other day, but I'm not in that boat. I think they'll beat Parramatta, and then I think if they beat Parramatta, I think they'll go in as favourites against the Raiders in that last game. So I haven't written them off yet. I mean, their inconsistency is a problem, but I still think they're a good chance of making it at this stage.
Yeah,
2 winnable games to come.
The media can't remember, and rugby league fans generally can't remember 1 week ago, let alone 8 weeks ago when the Dragons started this run of win-loss, 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 win-loss. So they'll beat, if that continues, they'll beat, but patterns don't tell you everything, but they do tell you a lot. There's no reason why Parramatta would win. They're currently sitting 16th or 17th?
Parramatta are 16th.
Yeah.
And they're about to go into a spoon bowl game with the Tigers the round after. So
yeah.
I don't know why people are so quick to write the Dragons off here.
Because they can only remember 1 week, so they write them off because this week they got smashed. 1 week ago, they smashed the Titans. 1 week before that, they got smashed. 1 week before that, they got smashed by the Bulldogs. 1 week before that, they beat the Storm. 1 week before that, they got smashed by Panthers. 1 week before that, they beat the Broncos.
People think that just because they had one bad day against the Sharks, that means that they can't beat Parramatta. I mean, it's just such a leap to take after one result.
Yeah, on my ladder predictor, I've done the maths and stuff like that, and if it continues on this pattern, they beat Parramatta this week. Obviously, the Storm. This week is. Sorry, I'm one ahead, right?
So the Eels,
Broncos. I have the Broncos beating the Dolphins. So in reality.
So that's the thing. If the Broncos go up against an understrength Storm side in that last round, and we're going to get to the Storm a bit later, this resting of players, but that does put the Broncos in the frame to pinch that 8th spot. But I think the Dragons, I think they'll beat Parramatta, and then if they beat Parramatta, they're a good chance of beating the Raiders. I know they're going win-loss, win-loss, but they lost to the Sharks, who are a top 4 side. They're coming up against 2 sides that are not in the top 8 in their last 2 games. They're winnable games, and I think the Dragons can still get there.
Well, the Broncos taking the Dragons' spot right now requires the Dragons to lose 1, but the Broncos to win 2.
Yeah, that's right. And people are pretty quick to get on the Broncos train as well. I mean, they've won their last 2 games, but before that they were very ordinary. And I know they've got players to come back in, but on the whole, the Broncos have been underwhelming this year. So there were people on NRL 360 last night who said, "Oh, gee, if the Broncos come 8th, you wouldn't want to play against them." You know what? If I was the Bulldogs, who are likely to come 5th at this stage, I would not be worried about the Broncos finishing 8th, given the inconsistency the Broncos have showed this year. I don't know why the Bulldogs would be worried about that as a possibility. I think the Bulldogs would be very confident going into a home final against the Broncos if the Broncos do get that 8th spot.
Yeah, it's that's a nonsense thing. It's really only the Raiders. If the Raiders win twice, they can also make the 8 possibly.
Yeah, I mean, they're a very remote chance, and look, I know they did beat the Panthers on the weekend, and well done to them on that upset win. But the reality is that's not going to mean anything if they don't make the 8. If they don't make the 8, and they're highly unlikely to make the 8, they're at the bottom of that group of teams on 26 points with a terrible for and against. So they would not only need to win their 2 games, against the Roosters and the Dragons, who are both top 8 sides. But they'd need other results to go in their favour as well. And with that many teams above them, I just can't see all of that happening for the Raiders. And so that win against the Panthers, well, yeah, it's a great win to beat the Panthers. Again, what is it going to mean anything if they don't make the 8? Of course it's not. It's not going to mean anything.
And that's the thing. Like, all of the teams that need to take the Dragon spot right now need to win 2 and rely on the Dragons to lose 1 or 2.
The Dragons' fate is in their own hands. Yeah. They win their last 2 games, they're in. The equation's very simple for them.
The Dragons can come as high as 7th as well if they win 2 and other results go their way. Blah blah blah.
Right. Yeah. Well, then, yeah. Obviously,
it's not likely.
They win their 2 games, they're in. I think that's.
There was a real funny thing about the Bulldogs, because last week, the Manly beating the Tigers was like confirmed before Thursday.
Yeah, Thursday. Yeah.
So last week it was a definite that actually the Bulldogs couldn't make the 4 because Manly would beat the Tigers, and I even had a conversation with Piercy, like before that, just earlier on Thursday during the day, where I was like. I said to him, like, Bulldogs can make the 4. And he said, that's a massissive call. It requires
a lot to happen.
Manly to lose. That's the main thing. Manly had to lose. Mm. And then I was like, yeah, you're right. It's not going to happen. That was the end result. You are 100% correct. Manly's not going to lose to the Tigers. Yeah. But because what it came down to was Manly and the Sharks, Manly beating the Tigers was a definite, even though they ended up losing. But it was a definite, right? And then because of that, either the Sharks or Manly would finish in 4th, and it would come down to the last round because they play each other in the last round. Even though the Bulldogs would play Manly, Manly versus the Sharks would decide who is 4th, and it would be either Manly or the Sharks. But because Manly lost, now the Bulldogs can actually get the 4th spot. Do they want the 4th spot? Who knows?
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be a bit of an uphill battle. I mean, all of a sudden, after that loss to the Raiders, the Panthers are looming the most likely team to drop out of the 4. If you look at it right now with 36 plus 158 differential compared to the Bulldogs 34 plus 146 differential. The problem for the Bulldogs has been that the Roosters and the Sharks have just kept winning. The Roosters and the Sharks have just not given them an inch. They've kept winning every week. So the problem is... I just can't see the Bulldogs getting there because the problem is the Panthers are 1 above them on 36 in 4th spot. The Panthers have got the Rabbitohs and the Titans to come. So I just think it's going to be... And the Bulldogs are well behind the Sharks and Roosters on differential. So even if they drop a game, those teams, the Bulldogs are unlikely to go past them. So I think at this stage, the Bulldogs most likely are going to end up having to settle for 5th spot.
You can't really see the Panthers dropping games against the Rabbitohs and the Titans.
No, well, they had that slip up against the Raiders, but you just can't see it happening.
I was going to say, because of that, because they had the slip up against the Raiders, they're not going to have 3 in a row. That requires them to have 3 in a row. They have to lose against the Rabbitohs and Titans after losing.
Teams that have got nothing to play for or are thinking about next year. Right. I'll tell you what, one team you wouldn't mind coming up against in the finals is the Sharks. Their recent finals record is terrible. In 2023, they finished 6th, lost in week 1 of the finals. In 2022, they finished 2nd and went out in straight sets. This is a team you would want to come up against. That's why I was really hoping myself that with the Bulldogs, they're going to come 5th. I was hoping the Sharks would come 4th because there'd be no chance of beating the Storm in week 1. And then the Bulldogs would come up against them in week 2, and I would really fancy the Bulldogs' chances if that were the scenario. Unfortunately, with Penrith losing that game, the Sharks have now moved into 3rd spot. So we'll see how that plays out.
I think the Sharks will still end up 4th based on my
I hope so.
ladder predictor. Because even if they win their next 2, they still end up 4th. Because you also got to remember the Roosters, just like the Panthers, the Roosters have the Rabbitohs in the last round and the Raiders this week. So the Roosters don't exactly have the hardest run. So basically, surely the expectation... Because the Panthers, Roosters and Sharks all have a super easy run. They've all got... the Raiders is the hardest team in their group. you know, and you can't expect the Raiders to do anything after. Like, same to be said, like, Panthers aren't going to drop 3 in a row against low teams. Raiders aren't going to do 3 in a row against high teams, right? You just can't
I can't see the Raiders beating the Roosters.
Yeah, and so that'll keep the Sharks at 4th because the Panthers, Roosters, and Sharks have such an easy run home. I mean, it's only 2 games for the run home, but yeah, the teams they're all playing, it's quite funny, is the Titans, the Raiders, and the Rabbitohs, you know. So, and Sharks play Manly.
That's the thing. I think that's the game where the Sharks could slip up. The Sharks are now ahead of the Panthers on differential, but as you said, that's the issue for the Sharks. That Manly game, if Tom Trbojevic is firing. I know Manly dropped that game against the Tigers. It was a terrible performance. But I'd give Manly a serious chance of beating Cronulla in that last game.
And so
I really would.
But the Sharks, if the Sharks win 1 and Bulldogs win two,
the only thing is the Bulldogs have got a fair differential to make up there on the Sharks.
If the Sharks win 1 and the Bulldogs win 2, then the Bulldogs will get 4th. But you just can't see it happening. Like, it doesn't. That's too complex and requires. And
they would need to do that with differential as well.
It requires just too much going everybody's way. I mean, the Bulldogs can still make the 4. It is possible. Like I said, until Thursday night, they couldn't make the 4 because it was a foregone conclusion that the Sea Eagles would beat the Tigers. And as soon as the Tigers beat the Sea Eagles, it meant the Bulldogs could make the 4.
And with Penrith losing to the Raiders as well has sort of slightly opened the door there. But as we mentioned, Penrith with the Rabbitohs and the Titans to come, you can't see them losing those games. So the Bulldogs probably going to have to settle for 5th, but I'd be very confident of them beating the 8th team, whoever it is. And then if they do go into that, they'll go into that second week of the finals against a team that's been beaten up by one of the top sides in the first week, and I think that's certainly not a bad spot for them to be in, especially given their defensive record this season. As we said, last season they were the worst defensive team. They've turned that on its head this year. They're now the best defensive team. It's a remarkable turnaround.
Like I said, you don't want the Bulldogs to play the Dragons because if they continue their pattern, the Dragons will Yeah,
I mean, you never know in a knockout game.
That's how it works.
But interestingly, even though the Bulldogs are 5th and likely to finish 5th, they are the 4th favourites with the bookmakers now.
Yeah.
So the bookmakers are giving them more of a chance to win the premiership than the Sharks, even though the Sharks are in the top 4. So that's very interesting to me.
Yeah, because the Sharks have had such an easy run all year, basically. You know, at the beginning of the year, we did.
And they're probably looking at that Sharks' recent finals record going, well, once they get to the finals, they don't have much success in recent times.
Yeah, exactly. But it's very, very interesting time.
Yes.
Look, I don't really think that, I mean, to me, right at this very point in time, for when people hammer us in, we're still getting flack on that Bulldogs video on TikTok from like 8 weeks ago. Like, guys,
yeah. So that
check the date.
Again, we'll point this out. That came after that loss to the Cowboys, where their position in the top 8 was in jeopardy at that time, and they've since gone on to win 5 games in a row. So obviously things have changed since we...
Somebody commented, you guys should do an updated video, and then we had to link them to an updated video. You need to watch more videos.
Yeah, we can only record the podcast when we record the podcast. Unfortunately, we can't go back and change past podcasts that
None of us are Nostradamus, man. At the beginning of the year, I had the Dragons coming 16th, so... that aged well.
It's a real guessing game, those pre-season predictions. All you can do at this time of year is laugh at them. Yeah,
exactly. My main thing right now is I just think the Dragons won't miss the 8 because of the requirements of them to drop. Basically, they have a 1-game allowance. So if they win 2, they've got 2 semi-easy games. They could have a 1-game allowance, and it requires the Broncos or the Dolphins to win 2, and the Broncos and the Dolphins play each other.
That's the thing, that the Dragons dropping out not only relies on them having to lose one or maybe both of their games against lowly opponents, the Eels and the Raiders, but it also requires teams that have been inconsistent all year winning 2 games in a row. And for teams like the Broncos, Dolphins, Knights and Raiders, well, there's a reason that they're not in the top 8. They've been terribly inconsistent all season. So it's amazing how people then turn around with 2 weeks to go and go, oh, these teams that have been hot and cold all year, all of a sudden they're going to win their last 2 games and take the Dragons' spot. It's quite a leap. It's quite an assumption to make. Really... I honestly... I'm not just saying it to be nice because you're a Dragons supporter. I think that they'll hold on to 8th spot.
Yeah, I think so.
Because then I don't think they're going to lose to Parramatta. And if they beat Parramatta, well, they're going to be favourites to beat the Raiders. And even if they lose one of the games, as we pointed out, it relies on these other teams to have everything go right. Yeah. And they're teams that have not had everything go right all season. They've been up and down all season, those teams.
Yeah.
That 4-way tie on 26 points. The Broncos, Dolphins, Knights and Raiders outside the top 8, and they're outside the top 8 for a reason.
Yeah, so it is... in all likelihood, okay, so if the Dragons win both, then it's 13 to get into the 8. 13 wins to get in the 8.
Yeah, and that's what it was last year under this 17 teams.
If they win one, it's 12. And so that... now, then we know for next year that 12 or 13... 13 is safe, 12 is a possibility.
Yeah, all we can go on is last year's ladder because, as we've said, that's the only year in recent times where we've had 17 teams. 13 or more wins got you in the 8 last year. 12 or less wins did not. That doesn't mean that that's going to happen again this year, but last year's ladder is our best indicator because we had 17 teams last year for the first time in a long time with the Dolphins coming in as opposed to 16 teams before that.
Yeah, and so... Kevin Walters, on the other hand, he's trying to save his job, I think.
Yes.
So he's come out and he said...
very boldly said that they will make the finals. There's no ifs about it, is what he said.
Yeah, what is it called? He got Adam Reynolds back at a bloody lucky time, I'll tell you, where it can make this thing, but... When you make those statements, I like the thing, like, when you make those statements, like, everything that... I'm very measured, and we're very measured in our thing, like, based on our current data and the potentials of the future, this is what can possibly happen. When you're silly and you say, like, this is definitely going to happen, that's going to come back and bite you every single time.
Yeah, I mean, he's obviously doing it to get through to his players. It's an overconfident statement. I mean, they've had 2 wins in a row and a bye in between. It's amazing what that can do for a team that looked completely gone. But that having been said, their fate is... The bizarre nature of the comment is because their fate is not in their own hands. It relies on the Dragons not winning their last 2 games. Again, as we said, 2 very winnable games for the Dragons. Now, all the Dragons have to do is win those 2 games. And it doesn't matter what the Broncos do. They could win their last 2 games by 1,000 points. Yeah. And they're not going to be in the finals.
Exactly.
So that's why it's a strange comment. I don't think it'd be a strange comment if Broncos' fate was in their own hands, because then you could go, oh, well, he's just sending a message to his players, win your last 2 games and you're in. But this relies on more than them just winning their last 2 games. Their fate is not in their control, and that's why it's a very strange statement to me.
As soon as you start talking about the mathematics kind of nonsense... You cannot definitively say it, and that's exactly what you're saying. The Broncos' fate is not in their hands. So to say they'll definitely make the finals, what's Kevy going to do? Go down and help coach Canberra to a win against the Dragons?
Get on the phone to Ricky.
Yeah, exactly. What can he do to achieve this? He needs the Dragons to lose a game, and so what's he going to help? Is it Trent Barrett at Parramatta beat the Dragons this week, and then? Well, you wouldn't want Kevin Walters help because last time the Dragons and the Broncos played, Dragons smashed them. Yeah.
I mean, this is the issue. I mean, the Broncos, they had a win against Parramatta. It's Parramatta, they're second last on the ladder. It just really amazes me how quickly people just, change their thinking on the back of, a win over a lowly side like Parramatta. All of a sudden, people have got the Broncos in their 8, even though they're reliant on other results and winning their last 2 games. it's quite a leap to think that the Broncos are definitely going to win their last 2 games, given that they've lost more games than they've won this year. They've lost 12 and won 10, and all of a sudden everybody's quick to say, oh, they're going to win their last 2 games and make the 8 and have other results go their way. You know, I mean, they've got to play the Dolphins. All right, the Dolphins have gone off the boil, and we're going to get to that later. But the Dolphins are in among that batch of teams. So that's not a foregone conclusion, that win. And I know the Storm may rest players in the last game, but they're the minor premiers. So people are just, giving the Broncos those 2 wins after such a hot and cold season?
Yeah.
That's such a leap and an assumption to make.
That's the way rugby league people work. Media, and I don't know if the media does it because they're looking for stories, but the average fan can only remember 3 days ago, you know, and you've got to look at...
And that's the thing, I mean, we're going to get to it later, the Storm resting their players, but I think Bellamy was sort of saying in the press conference, look, we're going to rest a lot of players this week. We're not sure about the week after. So there's every chance the Storm will bring their players back for the last round against the Broncos in order to give them I guess that's Bellamy's thinking. Rest them this week, give them the rest this week, and then have a hit out before the finals against the Broncos. So people think the Broncos are going to beat a pretty much full-strength Storm team in the last game?
We can get to that because it does tie into it. I would hazard a guess that there is absolutely no chance the Storm will rest players in the last round, because if they rest players this week, right, and then they win or lose, doesn't matter if they win or lose, and then they rest players next week, then they play a game and win, and then have to rest players again.
They'll be underdone, right?
Have had 1 game in 4 weeks.
Yeah.
So, of course, it would be better to rest players this week. Who are they playing?
The Cowboys.
Yeah, rest players this week. It makes absolutely no difference. What happens this week makes no difference to the Storm spot. Then next week, all those players are back. They play 2 games, and then they get the entire team gets a bye because they win their first game against the Sharks. Or the Bulldogs, but probably the Sharks. So... there's a lot of people complaining about the fact that Bellamy basically said we're going to rest players, and that is their right. They get to name whoever they want. There's a whole thing, like they have 30 players, right? Every team has 30 players they have to pick from, and if the Storm you can rest players at any time during the year. You know, like what difference does it make if Craig Bellamy rests Cameron Munster in round 6 as opposed to round 26?
Yeah, and I mean, on this issue, Phil Rothfield was saying, and I quote, this is what he said about it, talking about this Storm Cowboys game, where the Storm are likely to rest, I think it's as many as 10 players for this game. So Phil Rothfield says, I think for the fans that come from remote areas in North Queensland, they travel up to 6 hours to watch a game of footy to see the likes of Grant, Pappenhausen and Jerome Hughes play. That's garbage. That's rubbish. Fans go to the game to watch their team win. They don't go to the game to watch the great players on the other team. Name a fan who goes, you don't go, I really want to go watch the Dragons and the Bulldogs because I want to watch Viliami Kikau and Stephen Crichton play. You're going there because you want the Dragons to win.
Exactly.
The Cowboys fans are going there because they want the Cowboys to win. The Cowboys are in the hunt. They've confirmed their place in the finals. That's the other thing we should mention with the Storm beating the Dolphins on the weekend. That confirmed the finals positions of Manly and the Cowboys. So they're locked in. They can't miss out now as a result of that game. But anyway, this line about, they want to see the great players on the other team. No. They're going because they want to see their team win.
What they really want to see is the other team rest all their players.
Yes.
So their team can
yes.
win.
Hey, if my team's playing against the Storm, do you think I want them to rest their 10 best players? Yes, because I want my team to win.
They're going, there ain't no young Cowboy fan out there going, Cameron Munster's my favourite player. I can't wait to the Cowboys Storm game.
That's such a rubbish argument.
They're going, Valentine Holmes is my favourite player.
Nobody says that.
He's going to carve up and score 8 tries.
Nobody wants to go and watch players on the other team, star players on the other team, play against their team. They're going because they want their team to win. That's it.
I also, it's, again, I don't know if we're, because this comes up every year, basically. I don't know, if they're doing it just for media. But even like rugby league fans don't care. You know, like guys, like people who are not invested in the Cowboys and Storm game, they don't care. The only reason they ever care is it's the same kind of thing. Like, all right, Cowboys have a chance to knock my team out of the. If the Cowboys had an effect on the Dragons, right? Dragons making the 8, I would care if the Storm were resting players. Because if the Storm have to beat the Cowboys for the Dragons to be in the 8, then I would care.
Yeah, only if it would have an impact on your team.
Yeah.
That's it. Look, the reality is, like, we're in the media, right? So we pay closer attention to games than what the average fan would. The vast majority of fans only care about their own team. Yeah. That's it. And the vast majority only watch their own team as well. Apart from finals, big games, origins, grand finals, the vast majority of fans will only watch their own team play. Exactly. And that's the way it is. So this argument about, people want to see the best players of the Storm out there. No, they don't. People, apart from Storm fans, nobody else cares.
I don't know any Cowboys fans. Yeah, legitimately, I don't think they exist. But I guarantee you, if I did and I was in a group with a Cowboys fan, as soon as the teams are announced today and Ryan Pappenhausen and Cameron Munster are out, the Cowboys fans' response will be, awesome! Because when I take it off anecdotal evidence, but when Dragons are playing someone, like who are the Dragons playing this week again? Eels, right?
Yes.
I'm pumped because Moses is out. I'm not pumped because Moses is injured. I'm excited because Moses is out, and it means Parramatta's going to be an easier thing.
Yeah, because you want your team to make the 8, and if they've got an easier game to get there, well, you're going to take it with both hands. I hope
Clint Gutherson comes down with COVID and whoever else is in that team. I don't know who else is in the team that's actually good or whatever. The Parramatta team, no one at the moment. But
I mean, in terms of this issue of players being rested, Andrew Johns suggested last year that they should give $2 million in prize money for the minor premiership to fix this issue. But the problem in this case is it wouldn't work in this case because the issue is that the Storm have already locked in the minor premiership. So in this instance, that wouldn't help the situation. The prize money is $200,000 for winning the minor premiership.
Yeah, that hasn't changed in a long time.
I think it was $100,000 some years ago. It was doubled to $200,000.
I always thought it was dumb as well because I remember there was a whole thing about it where they can't distribute it to players because it would count towards the salary cap as well. And so there was some teams that would tell all their players, we're going to give you whatever it is, $10,000 less a year. But if you win the minor premiership, then you get that $10,000, basically. So I don't know what it's like now, or whatever. But I always thought that really the minor premiership should be, all right, there's 30 players in your team. So the minor premiership should be like a $10,000 bonus to each player in the squad, from the NRL that's outside the salary cap. As opposed to, here's $200,000 for your team. Does the team really need an extra $200,000? And it's because the prize money is so low, actually. Right? Because the prize money, the minor premiership prize money is so low. Does any team out there really need $200,000 from winning the minor premiership? It just goes on their pile. I'm not saying they're all rich or whatever, but the NRL already gives them $12 million or whatever it was. Whereas there's a bunch of players that could do with that extra money. But yeah, back in the I don't know about now. Back in the olden days, the club couldn't distribute it. But if you're on the minimum wage of whatever it is now, $100,000, and you go on to win a minor premiership and you get an extra $10,000, it's awesome.
Yeah, I guess from the competition's point of view, I mean, maybe the issue is that, the Cowboys get the luxury of playing a seriously understrength Storm team, whereas other teams earlier in the season didn't. But that having been said, the draw isn't fair on so many levels. I mean, for starters, some teams you play twice, other teams you only play once. I mean, the draw's not fair as it is. Around Origin time, where players are pulled out of games pre-Origin, I mean, that's not fair as well. There's so many inequities in the draw that if you're going to single this out, well, there's a lot of other things you need to look at as well.
What I mean.
Complete equality in the draw just doesn't exist. It's just not possible.
That's what I mean. No one would care if the Storm were resting 10 players in round 6. They only care because it's round 26.
That's the thing, and teams
way less impact.
And teams that, and we've seen a trend of this in recent years, where teams who've had players play Origin on Wednesday night have gone, well, I don't want this player backing up on the weekend because I want to save them. You know, I don't want to overwork them now and save them for the back end of the season. This is never talked about at that time. No, nobody ever said at that time, why aren't you playing your best players?
People travel to see your best players.
So it's the same. It's the same thing.
It's beyond ridiculous. Meanwhile, over at the Dolphins, see, I told everybody this would happen. You can go back if you want to go back and look at something. Go back and look at the announcement that when Wayne Bennett signed with South. I said, well, the Dolphins' season is gone.
Yeah.
And
well, you were right about that. So Wayne Bennett confirmed he'd joined Souths in May. That was after round 11. At that time, the Dolphins were in 4th spot with 7 wins and 3 losses after 10 games. Now they're in 10th spot with 10 wins and 12 losses after 22 games. So since signing with Souths, the Dolphins have fallen from 4th to 10th and won only 3 of 12 games since then. Clearly, there's been a drop-off. We know he's been pulling the strings at South. And for what? The Rabbitohs are 3rd last. They've had a terrible year. The Dolphins should look into this. Has there been a breach of his contract by helping another club while still under contract with the Dolphins? He's on $1.1 million a year with the Dolphins. Clearly, they haven't got value for money out of him since May when he signed with the Rabbitohs. Maybe they should look at docking his pay and saying, you can pay us back since May because we haven't got any value out of you since then.
They should sue him because I said it as soon as that. They should sue him. But he's clearly... And they have evidence because in 2011, right, at round 14, the Dragons were 10 wins, 1 draw, 2 losses. Top of the ladder. And then Wayne Bennett signed with Newcastle. They lost their next match. And then they just started to lose and lose and lose and lose. And at the end of the season, they ended up, I think it was 6th, 5th. They dropped out of the top 4. Yeah, they still made the 8. But they went from 10 wins, 3 losses to, in the last 12 games, only winning 4 and losing 6. And it was because of things like... Look, they I think it's on the rundown as well. Josh Schuster is shooting.
Yeah, that's coming next. Yeah.
So, Souths are suddenly signing players. Wayne Bennett is talking about how he's going to give Latrell Mitchell, he's going to sort Latrell Mitchell out. There's all this, like, what's going to happen next year with Souths and stuff like that, and Wayne Bennett is involved in it. As I said, Souths are signing players. Souths signed Ewan Aitken. Where does Ewan Aitken play right now? At the Dolphins. So he's, like, taking their players. And of course, it's one of the things about that is why did other players can feel a little bit like miffed. Like, why are you taking Ewan Aitken and not me? And so they're not going to play as well. They should really look into it and look at the evidence and look at the history of when he signed with when he left the Dragons. Now it's harder to look in the history of when he left Newcastle.
Look at the state.
Newcastle.
Look at the state of how he left the Dragons. Look at the state of how he left the Knights after he left, and now he's going to do the same to the Dolphins, who are a new
and the
club.
Broncos as well. He left the Broncos twice.
Yeah, they've only just come in. The Dolphins, a new club. They don't need these sorts of shenanigans this early in their history. That they shouldn't have to be cleaning up the mess that Wayne Bennett's going to leave after he goes. He's going to take
players. He's going to take staff. Who's the coach that's taken over?
Christian Wolf.
Christian Wolf is going to be left. He's another one that Wayne Bennett endorsed, just like Steve Price, Ivan Henjak, Jason Demetriou, whoever he left.
That's why you worry about who he endorses because you go, well, he's not going to want them to outshine him. Yeah, he's not going to want them to look better than him.
To be honest, he's never endorsed or left someone behind in a situation where that club goes well. So
no, he only cares about the club he's
going to.
He's either Actually, I can't say he only cares about the club he's contracted to because he's contracted to the Dolphins at the moment, and clearly he hasn't been focusing on them. As I said, that's a clear drop off. Ever since he signed with the Rabbitohs earlier in the year, they've fallen from 4th to 10th. That's a serious issue. That's a noticeable decline in performance. And they're in serious danger of missing the 8 now as well.
So this is honestly, they really should do something about it. They should sack him now.
They should have sacked him as soon as he signed with the Rabbitohs. They should have gone, right, you're gone, see you later, and installed... either installed Christian Wolf, or you could have just installed him straight away.
Because it's like I said at the time, I knew everybody who is a Dragons fan knew this was going to happen. It was predicted exactly. On all the Dragons internet forums I'm on everything, as soon as Wayne Bennett is announced as signing with the Rabbitohs, every single one of them was like, well, Dolphin season's over. You know, there was an immediate improvement at the Rabbitohs. There was immediate... What's the opposite of improvement? Decline of the Dolphins, and it just continues, and now they're in danger of missing out. Yeah. They were fourth.
And they were fourth, now they're 10th, 3 of 12 games since then, and Brent Reid on NRL 360 was saying that, it's not that much of an issue. How is it not an issue? How could a team go from 4th before he signed to 10th since he signed, winning 3 of 12 games? How is that not an issue? That's a clear issue.
If it hadn't happened before in the never-ending cycle that is rugby league, then you could say, like, we don't know what the issue... Like, last year they won their first 3 and everyone was on the bandwagon and all that kind of stuff, and then they had a clear issue with depth, which, you know, as soon as they got injuries, they dropped off and came whatever they came last year. This year, they didn't have the same issue with depth. They haven't had an injury crisis. The only massive change the Dolphins have had is Bennett signed with the Rabbitohs. And then bang. He's gone off to sign Josh Schuster now. Poor Josh Schuster.
Yeah, and just that unbelievable decline. Yeah, sorry. I think, he signed with the Rabbitohs on the 21st of May. So leading into that, they won 1, 2, 3 games in a row, and then he signs on the 21st of May. Then loss. So they win 3 in a row going into him signing with the Rabbits. Then they lose 2 straight away after he signs. And what you're telling me that Brent Reid's telling us that it had nothing to do with it? Like, give me a break. Like, in what world does it have nothing to do with it?
Oh, it definitely has everything to do with it. It's nuts. It's really
Schuster, yeah.
No, it's definitely nuts. And then it's things like this, like that show that he's concentrating so much on the Rabbitohs because they've announced another signing, right? Which they've signed Josh Schuster apparently on a $300,000 a year deal.
Yes.
Now he was He was famously overpaid at Manly, which Manly does.
Yeah, he was on $800,000 a year at Manly, and his deal with the Rabbitohs is reportedly worth just under $300,000, but Manly, as part of the termination agreement, have agreed to pay him $200,000 a year. So he's really going to be on $500,000 a year, not $300,000. So I think it's good for Schuster. It's a good deal because the beauty of being under the deal that he's under is his club are only paying him $300,000, but he's on $500,000. So he has $200,000 basically of no accountability because it's being paid by another club.
Trust me, the Dragons loved it when James Graham came over and the Bulldogs were paying.
Yeah. But it's the best scenario for a player having a rival club pay some of their salary because they're getting paid a certain amount, but they've only got... So Josh Schuster's going to be getting $500,000 a year, but he's only on $300,000 a year with his club. So he only has to perform at the level... I mean, obviously they'd want more out of him, but he only has to perform at the level of a player on $300,000. The problem when he was on $800,000 was that with his inexperience, he just wasn't capable of performing at that level, and then that put him under a lot of stress. That's the problem in general with being on big money, whatever it is. It's a double-edged sword, right? Everybody wants the big money. The problem is, though, it makes you a lot more accountable, and there's a lot more stress. There's a lot more pressure on you to get results. It's not always about getting the big money. Yeah, so it's the perfect scenario for him having $200,000 paid by Manly when he's not playing for them anymore.
That's like they're young. I remember that happened with Jared Hayne, right? He went from like nobody to hundreds of thousands of dollars a year and went deep off the rails, and then went and found God and came back to be really good, and then went to America and got lots of money and went deep off the rails. But the Rabbitohs are one of the most highest movers in the player market as well. So they've gained Ewan Aitken, Jerome Burns, Lewis Dodd from St Helens, Lachlan Hubner, Jamie Humphries and Max McCarthy, right? And they've let go Tom Burgess and Damien Cook. Now, it's not like thousands. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, well, six players is quite a lot. They've signed 6 players. The only other team that's kind of like signed more is the Tigers. But at least the Tigers have signed players by their current coach. You know, and then the Dolphins haven't announced a signing in a while.
Oh yeah, I wonder why that is.
Because
I wonder why. Yeah.
They've got Kulifeku Finefeuki, sorry for the pronunciation, Elijah Rasmussen, Oblix Tahar and Junior Tupu coming next year. But they've also lost a lot and it hasn't been replaced, right?
Mm.
So it's TPJ's gone to the Catalans, right? They've lost Ewan Aitken, Jesse Bromwich, Lachlan Hubner, Tavita Pengai Jr. and Jared Wallace. They have done some re-signings. But yeah, it's just insane that, you know, they've let Wayne Bennett excuse me.
They've let him run roughshod over them. Yeah. Well, why have they allowed themselves to be treated this way? As we said, they need to be looking at legal options here. You know, they've just allowed themselves to be pushovers. Wayne Bennett pushovers, the Dolphins, in this scenario.
Honestly, Dragons went through the same thing, and that's history. He's now showed form. So why would anyone...
This is why South Sydney need to be careful here, and they should know. I mean, he's already left their club, and their results haven't been great since he left. So what do they think's going to happen after his 3-year deal at South?
That's what I said at the time. Like, South's about to hope he retires.
This is it. Is it worth... Yeah, he gets, for the most part, he gets you success when he's there. Although, I mean, I know he's taken over at the Dolphins, a foundation club, so you can't have very high expectations for them. But in both seasons, they've started well and then fallen away. So, you know, this is the issue, though, is that, well, what happens after he leaves? You've got to be thinking about that.
Got to hope he retires.
It's just a sugar hit. Is he just a sugar hit coach?
You really got to hope he retires, because if he doesn't retire, he's going to go to sign with another club, and then leave you in a terrible, terrible situation.
I think while clubs still want him, I don't think he will retire because he's not. It's like this thing where people say, "Oh, well, why?" Well, and obviously Wayne Bennett would be very well off financially for the number of years he's been a first-grade coach on a high income. And a lot of people would go...
$2 million a year at Newcastle.
Yeah, well, a lot of people would go, well, why at his age now is he still putting himself through it when he could clearly retire comfortably? It's because, well, it's not about the money for him. It's about wanting to be relevant. And being relevant means you're still an NRL head coach. If he retires, well, who is he anymore? He's a former coach. He's doing it because he wants to stay relevant. He's doing it because he wants focus. He's doing it because he just doesn't want to go and retire and have nothing to do with his time.
Definitely not going to be the kind of retired ex-rugby league personality that goes and joins the media and stuff like that. So, yeah.
No, he will keep coaching until nobody wants him anymore. Yeah. And then even if nobody wants him anymore, then he'll start looking at, you know, Phil Gould type roles, general manager of football. That's what he'll look at after he's no longer wanted as a first
consultant like coach. He was for New Zealand.
Yeah, he will. He's this type of bloke who will always want a job while somebody will take him.
It's beyond ridiculous. I really think the Dolphins should do something about it, or even then, the NRL should really do something about it, because last time Wayne Bennett caused a big issue was at Newcastle when he took the $2 million a year, whatever, and then they put a salary cap on coaching staff because of it, because Nathan Tinkler, Wayne Bennett, all that nonsense, right? And they should look at players aren't allowed to negotiate with teams until certain times. It's very confusing, but until certain times and stuff like that. Till they're off contract, till certain dates of the year, blah, 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 blah. But coaches are allowed to go and negotiate with players for their club that they're going to next year. It's not a good thing, and it really ruins your current club. So they really want to protect the sanctity of the game and the quality of football. They need to look at the Bennett clause for coaches moving to different clubs.
Yeah, well, and clubs need to... It's just not... You may be able to get away with it with players going, you stay here to the end of the year, go to your new club next year, that's fine. but you can't do it with coaches. As soon as a coach signs with another club, you've got to cut them loose if you're the existing club.
Maybe
because
they need to implement the 1st of November clause for coaches as well. You can't sign, you can't negotiate with new things. But you definitely can't do it a year in advance. Yeah.
No, because it just has... A coach, an individual player is one thing, but a coach just has too much of an impact on the whole organisation. Yeah. Recruitment, not recruitment for the current club and for their future club as well. It just has far too much of an impact on the club to allow that scenario to take place. You might remember a number of years ago when Des Hasler signed with the Bulldogs, it was after he won that second premiership, or his second premiership with Manly in 2011.
During the parade, there was announcements.
He was due to go to the Bulldogs in 2013, but Manly thought, look, we're not putting up with this. They let him go a year early in 2012. Yeah. And you go, well, the Dolphins should have done the same thing in this scenario.
Yeah, exactly. So, I don't think Dolphins will make the 8 this year, like we discussed, and it's all Wayne Bennett signing with South's fault.
No, that's right. How do you go from being a top 4 team before he signs with South to being an outside the top 8 team since he's signed with South? And then, like Brent Reed did on NRL 360, say it had nothing to do with it and he has no issue with it.
What does it have to do?
Please, give me a break.
I mean, causation
it's
and
just
correlation...
clear as day that it had something to do with it.
Causation and correlation are not the same thing. The Rock does not keep the Tigers away, Homer Simpson, but this is very clear. It's very clear. So we've been waiting... What round are we in?
So we've finished round 25. We've got 26 and 27 to go.
So after round 25 and the millions of NRL bunker nonsense, most prominent this week was the Stephen Crichton one. This wasn't the only one. This was the most prominent one this weekend. So Stephen Crichton didn't get sent to the sin bin. The NRL defends the bunker about it. Now... To be honest, I don't care if Stephen Crichton goes to the sin bin or not, specifically for that shot. But when compared to shots over the weekend that went to the sin bin, Stephen Crichton should have gone to the sin bin, or everyone else shouldn't have gone to the sin bin. I don't my main thing with this, and it has been since the beginning of the year, is it's not about whether Stephen Crichton should go to the sin bin or not. It's about that decision. When did the Bulldogs play?
Friday night against the Warriors.
So beginning of the week, they set a standard. And it wasn't followed throughout the rest of the week.
Players, Manly had 3 players sin bin against the Tigers on Thursday night, only 24 hours before. Yeah. That cost Manly the game. They went 30 minutes with a player short against the Tigers. Then 24 hours later, Stephen Crichton not sent to the sin bin after Manly had 3 players sin bin.
At the beginning of the week, last week, they set a standard for this is how the week's going to be. Any contact to the head, sin bin.
And I say 3 Manly players sin bin. 2 of them were for similar incidents to what Crichton wasn't sin bin for in the Bulldogs-Warriors game.
And so it's the same thing. I don't care if those players at Manly go to the sin bin or not. What I care about is if that's a sin binable offence, then every one of them is a sin binable offence.
Yes.
So because and to be honest... We should go back to round 1 and say they set a standard. Was anyone sin bin in round 1 for a high shot? I don't know. I can't remember that far back.
Yeah.
But they set a standard then, and then it should have carried through to round 25.
That's the thing. Nobody's going to remember round 1 in round 25, but they are going to remember a game that was 24 hours earlier.
They are going to remember Thursday on Friday.
Yeah, I think I'm going to... If I'm watching a game on Friday night and I watch the Thursday night one, I'm going to remember it and compare the two.
And, commentary, the internet, everything was straight away. It was like, well, that's a bin. That's a sin bin. We saw yesterday, that's a sin bin. And it's most important thing that the NRL doesn't seem to get, where they come out and defend it, right? They come out and defend this one.
And you talk about the NRL defending it. Well, Graham Annesley came out and said, so of the 23 players banned for high tackles this season, suspended, 18 was sin binned or sent off for the tackle. And Graham Annesley was quoted as saying, of course we would like this to be higher. 80% is not good enough. Well, if it's mandatory, it's mandatory. How is it 18 out of 23 and not 23 out of 23?
Exactly.
It's pretty clear.
How did they decide the 5 that don't go? That's the most important thing, right? How did they decide the 5 that don't go? because it was meant to be based on, like I said, you go back all the way back then in round 1 or pre-season, they set the standard. If you hit someone high, you go into the bin. And 5 times throughout the year, they didn't do it.
Yeah, including the Stephen Crichton one. He's accepted a 1-game ban for that tackle. I think that was the right move. I think if he had contested that, it could have caused all sorts of problems. And with the Bulldogs guaranteed at making the finals now, that was a guaranteed. Well, that's a no-brainer to accept that 1-match ban.
And so then, of course, some people are arguing on the internet and stuff like that about whether it should be 1, 2, 3, whatever, blah blah blah, given other charges over the weekend.
Yeah, and honestly said we need to be getting much closer to a perfect score here. How is it not a perfect score? Yeah. If it's a sin bin, it's a sin bin.
Much closer to a perfect score.
If that's really a sin bin every time, how do you not have people in the job that can make that decision every time?
It's not a hard. That's actually not a hard thing to get perfect, right? Oh, head, sin bin, like that.
It should be, if they're going to go down this path, it should be like the punch. If someone punches, they go to the bin.
That's the thing, right?
Same thing.
There's no way you can't get it perfect.
It'd be like them saying, we've only sin binned 80% of the players who threw a punch.
Yeah, there's no way to get it wrong. Like they've gotten it wrong, but it's a weird thing that you can't. There's no justification.
Discretion doesn't need to apply here. It's a hit in the head. A hit in the head is a hit in the head.
I really want to understand how the discretion came into it. Like, how did it come into it? Why?
That's the thing. Something like that, the 80% thing he's going on about, that would only, you can only sort of use that as if it was completely discretionary.
Yeah, and so is it discretionary or not? Well, it is, because they've had 5 people that didn't get sin bin. Again, I'm really curious as to how they came to that decision. Why? What went through their head when they looked at the Stephen Crichton one and went, well, that one out of the 23 that have happened isn't a sin bin. But why?
How is it 18 out of 23 and not 23 out of 23?
If it's meant to be 100% of the time you go to the bin, I really want to know what went through the head of somebody who looked at that and went, that's one of the 5 that isn't a sin bin. And then how does Graham Anderson come out and defend it with like double talk and nonsense? And try and say, we're trying to get it perfect. You know how hard it is to sin bin someone if they throw a punch?
I don't... Yeah, you're right. I don't understand these Graham Annesley debriefs after the round. I think that they just add fuel to the fire. I think the NRL would be better off not having these debriefs and just moving on. I think it just gives oxygen to the bagging of the officials. I think they're better off not having these debriefs.
It comes from because people demanded it. I remember a few years ago the demand was the referee should have to sit down for a press conference as well. Yeah. Nobody wants to see that.
I think that these debriefs, that him sitting down and trying to justify everything after the fact,
nonsense.
I don't see the point.
It does nothing. Yeah, they were wrong. Cool. I still didn't get the 2 points.
But even if he says they're right, people just disagree with him.
Well,
I don't see the point in it.
I mean, no, but when he says it's wrong, there should have been a sin bin or whatever.
The team doesn't get the 2 points.
Are we going to go back and adjust the score?
No.
Oh, that shouldn't have been a sin bin. It was. Cool, again. Are we going to go back to... It was definitely the right decision. Okay, cool. But why?
So doesn't it only just add to the frustration
it's such a stupid
of the fans?
thing. They shouldn't do it. What they really should do is review go for a whole post-season review, because that'll do everything. Don't they go through a post-season review every year?
Yeah, but this is what they do, right? They say whenever the heat's on over an issue, like the bunker and the referees or whatever the issue is, the line is, we're going to review it at the end of the season. That's their way of getting the media off their back.
Yeah,
we're going to do a review at the end of the season. And then by the end of the season, everyone's forgotten about it and you're never held accountable for making that comment. It's a way of making it look like you're doing something about it without actually doing anything about it.
So dumb, man.
They're going to review the referees and the bunker. Look, I'll give you your review, okay? You don't need a review. You get rid of the bunker. Because, again, the bunker's there to get... If you're going to have a bunker and hold the game up all the time with captain's challenges, bunker decisions all the time, we've said it a million times on this podcast. Well, if you're going to do that, you need to get them right.
Yeah.
And so if you're going to hold up the game like that, hold up the flow of the game, well, then, they need to be getting them all right. Otherwise, what's the point in it? Otherwise, don't have any of the technology and just go back to having in-goal judges at either end. Get the touch judges to actually do something and help the referee. Get them to make the call on the field. Stop upsetting the flow of the game. Yes, people are going to blow up about their decisions, but at least then we won't be getting the game held up all the time. Yeah. Look at this. People are bagging the bunker every week. Do you really think it would be much worse if there was no bunker?
If it got it right 100% of the time, no one will bag it, and they'll never get it right. So it's clear it doesn't work. It's completely... See that Melbourne try that the bunker confirmed, where the ball is clearly... Oh, they found an angle where it... What?
Yeah, that was a joke.
Like, the ball is clearly out.
Yeah.
And they found an angle where you couldn't see the ball and went, so it's not out. That's the bunker. Or the... what was the other referee controversy on the Dragons game? Ashley Klein getting in the way of the ball.
Oh, yeah.
Zach Lomax try. But, that one's really funny because the pass is so clearly forward. It leaves Ben Hunt's hands so forward.
And I'll tell you what, the one the previous week, the one the previous week where the Rabbitohs were going on the attack trying to win that game against the Tigers, and there was a lead-up pass that went 5 metres forward, and then the one that the referee actually called forward went about a centimetre forward, but yet the one that went 5 metres forward was let go. Just these inconsistencies, game after game. And again, look, this is the thing. People could go, stop complaining. Well, we're complaining because they've got the technology to help them and they're still getting it wrong. Now, I know they can't rule on forward passes, but that's only one thing they can't rule on. Everything else they can rule on, and they're still getting it wrong. Again, it's the worst. It's a worst of both worlds scenario. The game is being held up to get it right because of they're looking at it with the bunker and with the captain's challenge, and it's slowing the game down, and they're getting it wrong. At least if you didn't have the bunker or the captain's challenge, well, at least the flow of the game wouldn't be held up as well.
One of the things about it is the so glaringly obviously wrong. Like, it's so obviously wrong that anybody who looks at it goes, well, that's wrong. Like, the Melbourne one is a classic example. The ball is clearly out. The one earlier this year that we got, like, heaps of views on social media for was that Api Coruscant try, right? In the Melbourne one, the ball is so clearly out. It's on the line, which means it's out and no try. It's so obvious to everyone who looks at it. It only required... Well, first of all, you could see it live. Just so everybody knows. You can see it in real time. It only required to go for the bunker to go, rewind, play, that's out, cool, done. Yeah. But instead, we looked at 47 camera angles. We tried to find one where you couldn't see the ball, so therefore there was no way to overturn it because there's no definitive evidence or whatever nonsense they had. It's so glaringly wrong. If there was the occasional mistake, you can forgive it. That's the whole thing with mistakes. If there's the occasional... Remember when I worked at Pizza Hut and I was coming late every day? And I would say sorry every day. And one of my assistant managers said, if you're actually sorry, you wouldn't keep doing it. Yeah. And that's the same thing. If the bunker was actually sorry or the referees were actually sorry, they wouldn't keep doing it. But they keep doing it. It's so glaringly obvious. Anyone who looks at it can see it. And so it's broken and they just need to get rid of it. If they can't get it right 99% of the time...
And this is where the advancement, and in a lot of areas, the advancement in technology has helped society. But, I mean, we've talked about that social media is not one of those areas. Well, this is another area where it hasn't helped, is in, reviewing of decisions in sport is one area where it hasn't helped, because you mentioned before they were looking at 47 camera angles. I'll tell you what, they weren't doing that in the 1970s and 1980s because they didn't have the 47 camera angles to look at. Back then, they just make a decision and get on with life.
Yep.
And I think the game was much better off back then. The advancement in technology, TV cameras, has ruined the game. Because now they're too scared not to not look at the technology because the technology's there, and so now we've got this terrible scenario where they're taking a million looks at decisions because they're terrified of making mistakes, And they're too scared of going down the path of not having the technology, because then they know people will say, oh, why don't you use the technology?
Yeah, and that's this isn't a thing that's common just to rugby league, right? Like the cricket has the issues, soccer has the issues, AFL has the issues. Every single sport that
the only sport it works in is tennis.
Yeah, I was going to say,
because it's black and white.
It's so funny
in or out.
that it's like it works in tennis because it's so obvious.
Yeah,
and I can't think of a single time where they've ever gotten it wrong.
No, and it's worked in tennis because players don't blow up at the umpires anymore, because now you have Hawkeye reviews and it's either in or out, and that's it. There's your answer, and it's done quickly in tennis as well. Yeah. 5 seconds, look in, out, done.
Yeah, but it's beyond a joke, and the review will do nothing. They'll just make everyone forget about it.
That's the thing. So you go, well, all right, does that mean... So what do they do? Does that mean that they just shouldn't show replays at the ground for risk of crowd violence after decisions are made?
Replays are replays, and they'll just always happen. But it's like I said, it's the two things that make everybody complain the most is the inconsistencies and the getting it wrong. Okay, like with the technology, when a referee gets it wrong, and then you just move on. It's fine. It's like the 2010 grand final when the referee and the touch judge missed Brett Morris going out, and then 2 plays later, Mark Gasnier scores a try. It was like, oh, that's bullshit. Oh, well, let's move on. But the replays and if that had been reviewed by the bunker, we'd be looking at it like years and years and years later, and weeks and weeks later, and everybody would still be saying it and so on. And if the bunker had reviewed it and then gone, no, he was in. Because he was so blatantly obviously out, except there was no angle from any of the referees.
But by looking at it so many times, they're trying to have the perfect game. Do they not realise perfection doesn't exist? It's plainly obvious here, because with the technology, they're still getting it wrong.
Oh, just so you know, perfection does exist. I'm perfect. So this is going to keep happening. It'll happen through the finals, and one day it's going to cost the grand final. Some team a grand final or something like that. But this is the weirdest thing in the entire world, right? This Tom Trbojevic thing. So Tom Trbojevic has requested to take a pay cut for missing so many games. And the NRL has, of course, rejected it.
Yes.
It's kind of a bizarre request.
Yeah, well, he's gone to them in good faith and said, well, look, I haven't played much football. I mean, he's played less than 30 games. Since the start of the 2022 season, he's on a salary of $1.1 million a year. And so, supposedly he's gone to them and said, look, I feel bad about this. I feel bad about not having played much football in the last 3 seasons. I'm happy to take a pay cut worth $750,000 over the next 2 years. The NRL, of course, have rejected this request because it does set a dangerous precedent.
But it's a really weird thing, like, is Tom Trbojevic off contract?
No, he's got... I'm just going to check his contract term. He's got a bit of time to go. I will check that for us.
Because...
Yeah, his contract expires at the end of 2026. Yeah.
So, what is he saying? His next 2 years he'll get paid less?
Well, that's he went to them and said, look, I'm happy to do this because I haven't been on the field enough. I'm happy to take a $750,000 pay cut over the next 2 years because he feels bad about having played less than 30 games in 3 seasons.
There has to be also other motivation for it, surely, like maybe they're trying to up the brothers or re-sign someone else or something like that. They'd have to.
Yeah, well, apparently Nathan Cleary offered to do this a few years ago when he was about to do a new deal at Penrith. The issue with this clearly is that are there other clubs who would pay $1.1 million a year for Tom Trbojevic? Yes, there are. So that's the issue with it, is that, you know, if he was to go to other clubs and he would be on significantly less than what he's on now, and they'd pay him significantly less, well, then maybe you could make an argument for it. But the reality is that that's where his market value is. There are other clubs who would pay that amount for him. That's where any argument for him to try and, or offer to take $750,000 over 2 years off his contract, that's where it really falls over, because his market value is at about what he's on now. So that's why it wouldn't be fair on the other clubs if he was allowed to do that.
Okay, so can a club, in the middle of a contract, upgrade a player's salary and extend their contract? So if Tom Trbojevic went to Manly right now and said, I want an extra $750,000 a year, can Manly do it?
Well, I think they probably could, but obviously they'd need to have the salary cap space to do it. Yeah.
But so what difference is it then?
I think in theory that they could do it.
Yeah. So why can't they reduce? Because what they could do, the Manly right now, if they really wanted to, they could tear up Tom Trbojevic's contract. They could pay him out, and he could go to another club for $750,000 over 2 years less. They could actually do that. That happens. Like Josh Schuster's had his contract torn up and he's gone to another. He's missed a year or whatever, gone to another club. Bunch of people get released early and go to other clubs. And then also, if they can upgrade. I remember one of the Sonny Bill's big complaints was he was signed for a long-term deal and they wouldn't give him an upgrade on his contract. And I didn't even know at the time. I still don't know. 15 years later, are they even allowed to do that? Like upgrade your contract in the middle of a contract? If they wanted to, could they give Tom Trbojevic an extra $500,000 a year? And if they can, then why can't they downgrade his contract as well?
I mean, in fairness, you could argue that if someone's on $1.1 million a year and has played under 30 games since the start of 2022, well, they're not getting value for money out of him, given how rarely he gets on the field. That having been said, though, I mean, they've signed him, though, to that money. So there's two ways of looking at that. The other way of looking at it is going, well, you've made the decision to sign him on that money, so you have to wear it if he's not on the field.
Manly always does that. I can't think of
that. Look, my issue with it is, if he was to go to open market, would he get $1.1 million a year at other clubs? Yes, he would. The Tigers would pay that money for him. The Tigers would pay more than that for him. The Titans would pay more than that for him. Parramatta would pay more than that for him if they had the space. There's any number of clubs who would pay that money for him.
Yeah, I can't actually decide whether I'm in agreement with it or not. I don't like it, but there's so when you say that, as a club, you could totally. Okay, so when you say the Tigers and the Titans would pay $1.1 million for him, Tigers could go to him and go, "I'll give you $1.5 million, right, or $1.8 million, or $5 million." Tigers could go and say $5 million a year, okay. And does that mean Manly can't sign him for $750,000 a year? Or even $1.1 million a year? So the NRL contract...
I guess that the issue here is probably that, well, he's under contract, Yeah. But I know, like you said, you could upgrade, right? And managers do it all the time. Yeah. They agitate for an upgrade. And clubs do it.
They could also tear up his contract and he can go and play, like James Graham did, go and play for less, and then Manly covers the cost and it doesn't count towards Manly or the new club salary cap, right? This is another thing where there's inconsistency, and I don't know. I don't like it because it's a little bit weird. It's weird to me that any human being in the entire world would go to their job and say, hey, I'm happy to return $750,000.
Yeah.
That's just bizarre, okay? Pay me less,
Yeah, I mean, Tavita Pangai Jr. walked out on a $750,000, but that was $750 a year, as opposed to $750
and he thought he was going to go make his bag in boxing, right? He thought he was going to go make millions of dollars for every boxing.
Yeah, we know how that turned out.
So it's really weird, and so I can't decide if I like it or don't, but...
Well, I'll tell you, the main reason I don't like it is that, Tom Trbojevic and Manly decided that he would be signed until the end of 2026 on this $1.1 million a year salary. Yeah. That's it. Case closed. Deal done. That's it. That's my issue with it is, Well, no, you can't then go and say, oh, no, I'll take less than that to help the club. No, you've signed the contract. The contract's been registered. It is what it is. That's it. Both parties wear it. Manly wear paying an injury-prone player that huge $1.1 million a year salary, even though clearly they're not getting value for money out of him because he's only played less than 30 games in 3 seasons.
The same thing happens to every club.
But this is the problem, though, is that clubs can never, and this is the other flip side of the argument, is clubs can never do a good deal, because if they sign a player on under the market value and get more value out of him, well, then his manager will just tell him to kick stones, agitate, try and get a release and go somewhere else for more money while that player's still under contract. So that's the other side of it, isn't it? That's the other side of the ledger. We've
discussed before how the clubs have so much power and they can cut players loose and so on and so forth. But I guess the players do have a lot of power as well. It's so weird. It's just bizarre to me.
My thoughts on it are the contract is the contract, and I know contracts are worth nothing these days, and that's the issue.
Yeah, that's why it's so weird.
That's the issue.
They can do so many things,
that's the issue.
They can't do this one.
Yeah, but from where I sit...
Arbitrarily decided you can't do this one.
Yeah, well, from where I sit, that's it. You know, the deal is what it is. Manly have locked him in on that money, and they live with the consequences. Whether he plays, whether he plays 80 or 90 games in the next 3 years, or whether he plays 10 games. So they've signed him on that money.
They have all
next 2 years.
They have all those rules around the contracts, and then you have things like what's his name, Fisher Harris, within a week moving off to New Zealand and things like that. Like out of like being let go of his contract, going to New Zealand for more money or possibly less money, and there's always nonsense, right? This one, it's just so bizarre to me that any player would do that, and then they choose this as the hill they're going to die on when they don't enforce the actual rules they have. Do they have a policy in place for this, or are they making the policy up on the run? And if that is the policy that they're going to make up on the run, is that the policy that they're going to stick with forever? Because also you can have things like they talk about all the time. Some players take pay cuts to stay with their thing. They get offered more at other clubs and they stay with their thing. Like, how is that any different? When the end of your contract, when you're at the end of your contract, right? And you have a club like, say, the Tigers offering... So say Tom Trbojevic is at the end of his contract and the Tigers are willing to offer him $1.1 million. And he goes, no, I'm going to stay with the Sea Eagles for $500,000. How is that any different?
Well, this is the difficult part of it is, as we've said, the contract is not a covenant. It's just there to satisfy both parties.
That's why it's so confusing and crazy, because the contracts in the NRL are absolutely meaningless. Players do whatever the hell they want to do. They have all these... The NRL has all these rules about non-negotiating with players before 1st of November or whatever the hell they are that no one understands. And then Fisher Harris can, suddenly within a week just tell the Bulldogs, no, the Panthers, he wants to leave, and then he's signed with New Zealand. And then you have other things where players are let go early out of their contract and paid out. And then Josh Schuster's not playing this year, right? He was let go from the Sea Eagles last year, at the end of last year, doesn't play this year, and then goes to Rabbitohs, and Manly still has to pay for some of his thing. He hasn't played for a year. If he comes back in 3 years, do Manly still have to pay for some of his thing? You have James Green going to the Bulldogs for $200,000 with the Bulldogs, going to the Dragons, and the Bulldogs are paying $300,000, whatever it is. Darren Lockyer on a reported $200,000 a year.
Yeah, I guess it's tricky, isn't it? Because in the case of someone like Schuster, we had a clear case of somebody who was being overpaid by Manly. He was on $800,000 a year, and he clearly wasn't at that level. And now he's coming back on $300,000 a year with South, or for 1 year with South, $300,000, with $200,000 being of the tab or extra being picked up by Manly. But his situation is different in that, well, now he's probably on about the value that he should be on, whereas someone like Tom Trbojevic, well, you go, well, hang on, you're on 1.1. When you're at your best, you're absolutely worth that money. The issue is you're injured all the time and you're not playing, and you've gone and said, I'm happy to take a big pay cut. So that's where it's different. The Trbojevic scenario is different to the Schuster scenario.
They're all different, but it's just weird that this one's this one is the hill the NRL wants to die on, because could Manly, like I said, just end his contract early, right? Can they do it? Who knows? You don't know because it's the NRL and they seem to arbitrarily decide. Israel Folau wasn't allowed to play for Souths or whatever it was because they weren't going to pay him enough.
Well, is it easier to just go, all right, as I said, a contract is a contract, but the contract, as we said, is only there to satisfy both parties. So then is it easier to just go, all right, well, if Tom Trbojevic is happy to take a $750,000 pay cut over 2 years, and Manly are happy to have him, well, of course Manly are going to be happy with that. If he's happy to do that, well, okay, we'll make the adjustment. And so if they can do that, well, everybody else can do it as well. Yeah. Is it just easier to just let it happen?
Because if Manly tore up Tom Trbojevic's contract right now, he could go to another club for $750,000 actually, and maybe Manly would have to pay top up.
So maybe that's
why can't Manly just tear up his contract now and then rehire him?
Well, maybe that the easiest thing is just to let it happen. But if it can happen for him, it can happen for anybody else.
It's just bizarre. Like I said, I don't actually know whether I like it or don't because it's too complex and it's too weird, and the NRL just arbitrarily makes the decision. Like if there was a whole, and you know what was the other one? Like Israel Folau. I think it was Israel Folau. It might have been Greg Inglis. It was one of them were going to go to one club. It might have been Greg Inglis. Was going to go to Brisbane, actually, before he settled on South. No, actually, so the Greg Inglis one was it was different. Israel Folau was going to go to Souths or something like that. And then they said, oh, you're not paying him enough, so he has to go to Brisbane because they're offering him more. You know, the NRL, just for that one specific player, valued him themselves. And then have never done it again or never done it before.
Yeah.
And then the Greg Inglis one, I remember, was really weird, actually, because that was another contract thing. He was going to South, and then he was getting third-party sponsors. And the NRL, just for Greg Inglis, made those third-party sponsors sign some statutory declaration saying they weren't paying him to go to South. Because third-party sponsors can't be a sponsor telling you can only play for this club. But every third-party sponsor is actually like that. Like, Redfern Automotive is not going to sponsor Valentine Homes in North Queensland.
Yeah.
But this
is the issue. So Manly aren't allowed to do this. But yet, whenever the Roosters let go of a player, it's a player that they don't want anymore, and they always sign a superstar player to replace him. So the Roosters are able to do that all the time. But yet, Tom Trbojevic is not allowed to take a pay cut in this scenario.
But again, on the flip side, players shouldn't be able to just take pay cuts to fix up a salary cap mess that Manly historically has. I can't decide whether I like it or not. Manly historically is a salary cap can't handle their salary cap. They must realise they've screwed this up. They probably want to sign Timmy Trbojevic, the youngest brother, or something like that. Tom Trbojevic is happy to take a pay cut to sign.
But I mean, that's where the Pandora's box opens, doesn't it? Because clubs will go to players and say, "Look, if you take this pay cut, we'll give you a job at the club for life afterwards."
One of the other ones was there was the whole suspect around Mark Gasnier coming back, right? Because Mark Gasnier came back on a back-ended contract, where he was getting paid a really small amount, actually, only $200,000 for his first year to win a premiership, and then he was meant to be upgraded to $800,000 the next year, retired.
Yeah, I remember Chris Walker back in the day was supposedly only getting $50,000 to play for the Roosters. I mean, come on, who was
they have so much stuff, and the weirdest thing about this one, the only thing I can really definitively think about this is weird that this is the hill the NRL wants to die on. After all the shenanigans that have happened through the history of NRL contracts, this is the one that they're like, no, you can't do that. Okay, but you can put Darren Lockyer on $200,000 a year.
It's a very difficult thing to manage, isn't it? The salary cap, and again, perfection doesn't exist, right?
So for the third year in a row, ex-Manly player Jared Waerea-Hargreaves has copped a suspension or a charge leading into the finals for the Roosters in his retirement year. So he retired and then went and now he's signed for...
Yeah, he's going to England. Yeah. So I couldn't... Willie Mason said he thinks the league will be happy to see the back of Jared Waerea-Hargreaves. He says, I swear the NRL can't wait to see the back of him. The amount of work that he gets the judiciary in. I love watching him play. I'm an old school player, Mason said. I love seeing Jared, but I know for a fact the NRL will be looking at him and saying, you've caused us enough. I mean, yeah, of course, Willie. I mean, what do you expect? Of course they're going to be glad to see the back of him. He doesn't bring great headlines to the game. Every second week he's getting suspended. The guy's had more charges than Donald Trump. This is a guy who gets charged all the time.
Yeah, and this is the third year in a row he's done it leading into finals. Remember last year where they had wrapped up the game and then he got 2 charges in the space of 5 minutes against the Tigers? And they got suspended for 7 games or whatever it was.
Yeah. That's all right. I can't
the
work
Roosters
out,
would be happy to see the back of him.
I just can't work out what Mason's point is there. It's like, well, yeah, of course, any league is going to be happy to see the back of a player who gets suspended all the time for acts of foul play. Any league is not going to want that to be in the media. And yeah, you're right, 100%. I don't think the Roosters. Well, there's a reason the Roosters are letting him go. The Roosters never let go of anyone they don't want to let go of, ever.
I mean, and they love him and Nick Politis. There was the first ever time that Nick Politis apparently went on the field for a 300-game celebration in the history of Nick Politis' run at the Roosters. So the Roosters clearly love Jared as a person. All the players love him. Like Pearcey said, the Roosters are super loyal to their ex-players and stuff like that as well. But I'm sure as a football club, the Roosters are happy that he's finally off their field.
100%. He's been part of 3 premierships there, 2013, 2018, 2019. So, yeah, 3-time premiership player with the club. No doubting his quality as a player, but just a lot of foul play in his game, a lot of suspensions, and I think in the end it's just gotten too much for the Roosters. I mean, his age as well. He's 35 now. How much more were they really going to get out of him with all the suspensions? It was certainly certainly time to let him go, I would have thought.
He's going to make his bag. He also he did appear in the 2010 grand final where they got smashed. Hold on to that for a long time. Of course, they'd be happy to see the back of him. That's why they're letting him go. But he'll come back to the club in some thingy mentorship.
Yeah, it's just like Mason said that as if, can you believe that the NRL would want to see the back of him? I mean, it's pretty obvious, isn't it, Willie? I would have thought.
Well, they're all happy to see the back of Willie Mason too. It's not a SmartB Sports Update podcast without some mention of nonsense at the Tigers.
Yeah.
John Hopewadi attended. It was some award show or whatever.
Yeah, it was. He was a guest at the Tigers Gala 25-year dinner on Friday night. Having played 2 seasons for the club in 2000 and 2001, he's hardly a club legend, but anyway, he did appear for the club in 2 seasons. So Hopewadi apparently put a sour taste in the mouths of those in attendance when he allegedly abused and threatened New South Wales Rugby League Chief Executive David Trodden.
Yeah.
Apparently the vitriol was so intense that Trodden left the function with a couple of officials escorting him and his family to their car.
I heard from somebody who heard from somewhere, so it's just the sources just trust me, bro. Who heard from somebody that was there. But it was like expletive-laden, very loud, show-stopping kind of craziness. What the...
we wish we were there to see it.
What nonsense is that? Like, what craziness is that to do?
Apparently onlookers were stunned by the verbal attack. One onlooker, this is quoted by Wide World of Sports, one onlooker was quoted as saying it was horrible to watch and all everyone could talk about afterwards. The language was disgusting and Hopewadi's actions ruined what should have been a great night for the club. It's just a circus with John Hopewadi, isn't it? Just he just makes a fool of himself time after time. And as you said, and the Tigers.
Yeah, the Tigers every single time.
They're either directly or indirectly getting themselves in hot water all the time, aren't they?
Yeah, 100%. It's just they just can't do anything. It's been
they can't get clear air without any dramas.
They're the most talked about club. Sorry, Adam, but
it'd be them and the Rabbitohs, wouldn't it? They'd be our 2 most talked
Adam
about.
Adam from my tipping comp who gets all worked up when we bag the Tigers. But as I said, I think the Tigers' problem is not on field. It's not coaching. It's not anything. It's simply the fact that off the field they can't last a week without something, and they just must hate each other. Is it time to split? You know, get rid of the merger, because they just hate each other, and it's so obvious that. You know, this was always going to blow up because it was at a place with like hundreds of people. And
that's the thing. I would have thought inviting John Hopewadi to a gala dinner is sort of inviting trouble, isn't it?
But just the conspiracy theorist in me is like, it could have been that the West's portion of the Tigers. Wait, hold on. It was Balmain Tigers and West Magpies. The West portion of the Tigers sat down and went, ooh, let's invite Hopewadi and this guy that he hates and hope that it blows up for the Tigers.
Yeah.
You know, because that's the
problem. They're at, as you said, they're at war with each other. Yeah. And they're supposed to be...
And everyone knows it.
United.
They hate each other. The West Magpies and the Balmain Tigers hate each other, and they do things against each other. And that's why nothing is secret at the Tigers. Everything leaks. Everything. And you have to operate under the assumption, if it's a Balmain Tigers issue, someone from West leaks it. If it's a West Magpies issue, someone from the Tigers issue leaks. So is it time for someone to come in and do a review and go, guys, you can't work together. Pick one. All right? You're either Balmain Tigers and they can play in the NRL, or you're West Magpies and they can play in the NRL.
And the thing is, I think they both could have survived on their own. I mean... A lot of people would go, oh, look, Balmain as an area has changed, and it's not... It used to be a very working-class area, now it's a very affluent area. But that having been said, their supporters are so passionate. Yeah. They pack out Leichhardt Oval. They have a really passionate supporter base. So I don't buy this argument that, oh, Balmain changed as an area, and that's why the Balmain Tigers couldn't survive. I think they could have survived... And obviously the game is very healthy out in the western suburbs. The Magpies could have survived as well.
Yeah, I think so too. And so they could like, it's just such a bizarre thing. I think that's the Tigers need to sort out their off-field nonsense, because it's week after week after week, and you just
year after year
feel sorry for them. Like, that's all I can think now. Like, I feel so much pity for them. I feel so sad for them that they can't go a week without having some off-field nonsense story. You know, it's very rarely, really, if you think about it, on-field issues, except for the fact that they lose. It's very rarely... I mean, there was stuff like Robbie Farah saying Mick Potter couldn't coach to Gordon Tallis, apparently. But, again, that was like off-field. It wasn't on-field. And, I feel so sad for the Tigers, man.
Hopefully they... have a reversal in fortunes next year with Jerome Luai.
Well, I just can't see it happening, unfortunately, for Tigers fans because of all this off-field stuff.
Yeah, I can't see them turning it around in a big way next year. They may win a few more games, but Jerome Luai might get them a few more wins, but is he going to turn them into a finals team on his own? It's hard to see that happening.
Unless he's Stephen Crichton. If he's Stephen Crichton, then he can, because that's what Stephen Crichton did for the Bulldogs.
The only thing is, though, that they went... It wasn't just Stephen Crichton that they added at the Bulldogs, isn't it? I mean, they went and added, Jamin Salmon, Kurt Mann, Connor Tracy, these other workman-like players around it who are utilities who've added to it as well, whereas with the Tigers, it's just Jerome Luai.
And so then... Anyway. During the week, they named the 14th Immortal. It ended up being Ron Coote, who retired in like...
This is the issue. So Rugby League Week ran the Immortals from 1981 until 2017, and then handed over control to the NRL when the magazine folded. Now, Ron Coote had a great career, played in 6 premierships, 4 with South, 2 with the Roosters. But he retired in 1978. So for whatever reason, between 1981 and 2017, Rugby League Week decided not to make him an Immortal. And they named 8 Immortals. For whatever reason, in 2018, when the NRL took it over and named 5 Immortals, the NRL decided not to make him an Immortal at that time. So for whatever reason, in 2024, they've decided to go back and make a player who retired in 1978 an Immortal. Well, what do they know about him in 2024 that they didn't know in 2018? What did they know about him in 2024 that Rugby League Week didn't know about him between 1981 and 2017 when they were running this concept?
Why wasn't he created an Immortal before Andrew Johns was made an Immortal.
Yes, Andrew Johns was made an Immortal, but was made an Immortal in 2012. Andrew Johns retired in 2007. So how could Andrew Johns retire in 2007 and be made an Immortal in 2012, but yet Ron Coote, who retired in 1978, gets made an Immortal in 2024? Work that one out.
Doesn't make any sense.
Doesn't make much sense to me.
One of the other things about it that I want to highlight is like Johnny Raper was named an Immortal in 1981, right? 1981.
Yeah.
So the reason that Ron Coote missed out on more representative games and things like that is because he was behind Johnny Raper. They played at the same time. So Johnny Raper is the Immortal. And so the second best lock ever, some can say, if you want to say ever, is Ron Coote. So now the best and the second best are Immortals for the positions. So there was even the thing that I saw, like, they gave him the nickname Prince of Locks because Johnny Raper was better than him, so Johnny Raper got the King of Locks.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So they've now inducted a guy, like, I'm not bagging Ron Coote, man. Like,
that's the thing. We're not bagging him. He had a great career, but this is the Immortals.
Yeah.
This isn't some school athletics carnival where everybody gets a ribbon. This is the Immortals.
It doesn't make any sense to include it. That's what we're bagging. The nonsense. And then it's come out that the two current living Immortals.
So there's Andrew Johns, Mal Meninga,
and Wally Lewis.
Wally
Lewis is alive, right?
Yes.
So the three currently living Immortals didn't even get consulted or anything like that. They were basically just called up.
You know what? Okay, that's a good point you raise. And I'm not saying that any of them have any problem with Ron Coote, but all I'm saying is that could the reasoning for that be that, we're not consulting current Immortals because we don't want a situation where current Immortals have some, and again, I'm not saying that this is happening, I'm just saying that, is this the reason why? That they would go, current Immortals might have a personal grievance with others who could potentially become Immortals, and that could become some sort of a conflict of interest where they go, I'm an Immortal, I don't want you to be an Immortal, I don't like you. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Could that be a possible reason for that?
Well, I don't know, because then you have the judges that are...
But that's the thing, the judges are probably people who, would never come into consideration of being...
Yeah, so the judges who deliberated over candidates when Andrew Johns was inducted were Wayne Bennett, Ray Warren, John Grant, David Middleton, Ray Hadley, Phil Rothfield, Roy Masters, Jeff Prenter, Ian Heads, Norman Taskar, Tony Durkin, Martin Lee, and Mitchell Dale.
Okay, so all of those people have done...
Then also, the living Immortals at the time, Fulton, Raper, Langlands, and Lewis were also...
So they were consulted at that time?
They were given a vote for Andrew Johns.
Okay.
And then in 2018... that's a massive panel.
But I guess at that time... That panel you read out, was that when it was under Rugby League Week's guidance, right?
Yeah.
So now it's since changed hands. Now the NRL are running it.
Yeah, now we don't know who the things... To be eligible...
Well, I know that Phil Rothfield was on the judging panel because he said he was. Mm. But look, I can only think that... Well, I'm thinking, what other reason could there be for current Immortals not being consulted? What other reason could there be? Because in terms of expertise, well, there's no one better, right? So if it was about expertise on the game, they'd be the first ones you'd be asking. Yeah. So what I'm saying is there's got to be some reason why they weren't consulted. And that's the only thing I can think of is that, could you have a scenario where current Immortals go, look, I have some personal grievance with this person, and I don't want them to become an immortal, and they don't want that to come into calculations.
You don't want Darryl Broman judging on the Hall of Fame inductee.
That's an example, right? We know Darryl Broman wouldn't include Les Boyd as a Hall of Fame inductee, so that's where I'm coming from.
Yeah, the only eligibility to be considered to be inducted as an immortal is to be in the Hall of Fame. I think they need to expand that eligibility. Inducted into the Hall of Fame and also have retired after all of the current immortals and also, this, that, or the other. Because they can just add anyone in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, because Ron Coote retired 46 years ago and he's just been made an immortal.
Mal Meninga before Andrew Johns, but before even Arthur Beetson, right?
Yeah, so Arthur Beetson was inducted in 2003.
But I mean, Ron Coote, did he retire before?
Beetson would have retired after 78. He played State of Origin.
1994.
Yeah, he retired much later.
So it's just bizarre that they've just included this guy.
So
if they wanted to include him, they would have included him.
So this is the thing. So since the NRL's taken over the concept, since 2018, they've named 6 immortals. So they're going at one a year. One a year they're going at since they've taken over. It's gone from 8 to 14 in only 6 years. With every immortal that gets added, the less significant the achievement becomes. If you're going to add a heap of players to something, well, that's what the Hall of Fame is for. The Hall of Fame's got 126 players in it. Add whoever you want to that, but don't just keep adding the immortals. I just think the NRL hasn't given enough respect to the Rugby League Week judges who came before them.
So they've got more than 10% of the Hall of Famers are immortals, basically.
And how could Andrew Johns, as we said, who retired in 2007, be added in 2012, but Ron Coote, who retired in 1978, gets added in 2024? It makes no sense.
No, it's bizarre and it's stupid, and it makes every time it makes the immortals even worse. It's Johnny Raper was a better lock than Ron Coote.
So what are we get? We're going at one a year. In 6 years are we going to have 20 of these? If we got 20.
Why don't they make it the Immortals is a 1 to 7? There's 17 of them. It's the best ever of each position, and then it can be replaced. So Andrew Johns one day, a better halfback will come along, and Andrew Johns loses his immortalship. It's another one of those things that the NRL has done just so haphazardly and so random that you can't comprehend why they do it or how they do it, and it just makes it ridiculous.
As I said, I don't think they've shown enough respect to Rugby League Week, who, again, they introduced the concept in 1981 and they folded in 2017 and handed it over to the NRL. So that's 19 plus, that's 36 years Rugby League Week were running it, and they only had 8 immortals. In 6 years under the NRL, they've added 6. It's too much acceleration.
Yeah, it is. It absolutely is. That's it for Rugby League for the week. We'll see what happens this weekend if the Bulldogs miss the 8. I'm so funny.
Thankfully, that can't happen, everybody. They're locked in.
They could still possibly miss the 8. No, they actually can't. Anyway, this morning, other sports, this morning the US Open has started.
Yes, it has.
Is it on right now?
It is on right now, so...
Yep. Now.
Yeah, so in terms of, I won't go previewing Aussies because of it's going to date pretty quickly, but I know Alexei Popyrin, who won the Canadian Open Masters 1000 in the lead-up, he won his first round match in straight sets this morning. Isla Tomljanovic won her first round match in straight sets this morning as well. Alex de Minaur plays his first match tomorrow morning. Just looking at some of the contenders in the men's, Novak Djokovic, who's defending his title at the US Open. He's looking for his first major win of the year. He's coming off his Olympic gold medal win. I think he is playing this morning, but who knows when that's on. It's probably on later in the morning, and I'm sure whoever he's playing against is going to win because it's the first round.
Yeah.
Carlos Alcaraz is the 2022 champion at Flushing Meadows. He's looking for his 3rd straight major win, having won the French Open and Wimbledon this year, so that's something to keep an eye on. Yannick Sinner, the other major contender, there's a sort of a new big three in tennis now.
Yannick Sinner, the drug cheat.
Yes. Djokovic, Alcaraz and Yannick Sinner's the new big three. In every major, they're the three clear favourites.
I was surprised to not see that.
He won the Australian Open. So we're going to talk about that now. Yannick Sinner.
Yannick Sinner, the drug cheat.
Escaped suspension despite 2 failed drug tests.
He won the Australian Open on drugs. On PED.
Tested positive for low levels of clostebol, a banned anabolic steroid, on March 10 and March 18, just after the Australian Open.
Yeah. I was really surprised not to see that in there.
I put that there and I was going to mention it. Yeah, I thought we'd killed 2 birds with 1 stone here.
But Djokovic is playing, this morning, he's playing R out.
Yeah, look, he's going to win. I mean, if he doesn't win, you can laugh at me all you want on social media.
Playing a generic Star Trek guy. What are they called? Red shirts.
So this is what the ITIA said, or an independent panel held a hearing on August 15 and found the traces of the substance were, and I quote, a result of contamination from a support team member who had been applying an over-the-counter spray containing clostebol to their own skin to treat a small wound. One of his staff bought the spray and another one had used it on himself before massaging and thus contaminating Sinner. Are we really buying this, that one of his staff had a spray and massaged him and contaminated him? Even if that's true, he should still be held accountable and he should still be banned.
So, that's bullcrap. That's not how it works. They would have been better off proving that it was a contaminated supplement than using this nonsense. It's obvious. They used the spray on him. It's so obvious. They used the spray on him. They may not have known. Khalil Roundtree, earlier this year in the UFC, was meant to fight for a title eliminator. And one of the things that happened was, before his match, he realised that one of his nutrition team, had given him a supplement that contained a banned substance. Not a performance-enhancing substance, but a banned substance, nonetheless. Self-reported and copped a suspension. See, that is a accidental dosage suspension. It's the same thing. You, as a professional athlete, you expect your team to follow the same rules as you. Mm. If your rules say you can't use this spray, then you can't use the spray. And screw-ups are not an excuse. They're actually not. Khalil Roundtree got suspended for a screw-up. A contaminated supplement, on the other hand, like Yoel Romero got popped positive, and Nate Diaz as well, popped positive, because they had contaminated supplements, because the supplement itself said doesn't contain any banned substances, and they trusted the company that it would not. There's nothing they can do about it. Like, it's not on the ingredients, anything like that. Yoel Romero successfully sued the supplement company for like $14 million. Not only because of the fact that he could have lost income from the UFC, but also because of the taint on his reputation. Because people thought he was a drug cheat or whatever. But actually it was. It's like, you go to a restaurant and say, I'm allergic to peanuts, and they give you something and they say, don't worry, there's no peanuts, and then you have a allergic reaction. Nothing you can do about it. Something like that is his team member, even if that whole nonsense story is true. Yeah. Even if, doesn't matter. And this whole trace amount thing, the trace amount where it's so little that it doesn't doesn't enhance your performance or whatever, doesn't matter. No. Because the rule is 0. Yeah. The rule isn't trace amounts that don't perform, they enhance your performance are fine. The rule is 0.
Yeah,
you don't have any. Like, that's the rule.
Yeah, and again, even if this nonsense story is true, well, that's on him. He had staff members who put him in that position. And the reality is that he had a banned substance in his body. How it got there, well, too bad,
exactly.
Mate.
The only thing, like I said, how it got there, the only thing is, if it's a tainted supplement that you have checked and the company says there's none of it, nothing banned in it, and on the ingredients in the supplement, that thing is not there. I take some supplements, right? And And I don't compete in a sport where there's drug testing. That's fine. Everybody in jiu-jitsu is on the PEDs, right? And so if, like, my supplement says, contains anabolic steroids, I'm okay.
Yeah.
And for a tennis sport, professional sport where anabolic steroids are banned, if you have a supplement that says this supplement is stamped and approved and definitely doesn't contain anything banned, and you still take it, it's on the supplement company, it's not on you. You have done your due diligence, right? That company will be screwed. That company will be closed forever. Like in Australia, the reason Body Science is the main supplement provider of the majority of sporting teams and professionals is because they have two types of supplement, actually, in Body Science. One is a type of supplement like creatine or whatever. It's like, no, I'm not talking about performance enhancing drugs. I'm talking about things like creatine and pre-workout. They have one type that is like stamped, labeled. Like, we have tested this specific batch and it contains nothing illegal. You are safe to take it. Because a rugby league player or because Body Science does Bulldogs, I think, actually. Tennis player can't go and do scientific testing on the supplement, the creatine he's taking or the pre-workout he's taking. But, as I said, you expect your team to know. So his team member, Massage Dude, should have known, even if that nonsense story is true. And
that's the thing, we don't even know that it's true. How do they know that it's true? It really has a feeling to me like that they got together and went, well, how do we minimise the damage here? We need to come up with some story that makes it look like he's not accountable, and this is what they've come up with. It's got that real look about it. Yeah. It's got a bad smell about it. He's parted ways with his fitness coach, Umberto Ferrara, and physiotherapist Giacomo Naldi after they were deemed responsible for these positive tests.
Doesn't matter.
I don't like the look at this. He's clearly just gone, all right, I'm going to sack them to make it look like they're responsible, have them take the fall for me. But as we said, even if this garbage story is true, he still should have been suspended. Yeah. There still should have been far more serious ramifications.
It's John Jones famously... Well, John Jones failed and been suspended for failing drug tests, right? And then there was a whole thing, like this really funny story about John Jones, supposedly the greatest MMA fighter of all time, but he's failed drug tests, so I don't rate him as the GOAT. He once hid under a gym, the ring in his training room because USADA came to test him, and he knew he says now that he was high, like he had smoked marijuana, but marijuana wasn't banned, so it's nonsense, right? He hid under the octagon for like 8 hours and pissed and shit himself and stuff under the ring because he was going to get done. It's full famous, like, true story. He finally admitted that, yeah, he did actually hide under there. And then he said, it's because of marijuana, but everybody knows it's because, dude, you've previously been suspended. Then he came back and he fought Daniel Cormier and stuff like that. And then his drug test popped. And the UFC did mental backflips because Dana White loves John Jones so much to say he only had a picogram of the banned substance in his system. Apparently, I think he actually popped twice as well with picograms in his system. And it's like, it's so little it doesn't have an effect. You know what that means? It means it hasn't all gone out of his system yet. Like I've said before, steroids and performance-enhancing drugs, the name is a misnomer. It's not they will make your just before I run out onto the field or onto the tennis court, I inject myself full of PEDs and then I'm going to perform better. It allows you to train and recover better with an unfair advantage over your other competitors who aren't taking PEDs. So he has taken PEDs. He has had an unfair advantage and therefore should be suspended. I don't know what the suspension times are in tennis.
This is an area where they've been far too lenient on players who test positive, very lenient with suspensions. And it's a very murky area with tennis, and you get the feeling that with tennis, a lot of it is we really don't want to know what you've taken. We don't want the bad press.
So just make it free. Free for all then. Just make it free for all, like jiu-jitsu.
Well, at least then it's honest.
Yeah. Jiu-jitsu only...
I still wouldn't want to see that, but at least it would be on. It would be more honest than what it is now.
Because that's the thing, right? Like we had the only competition in jiu-jitsu that tests is the IBJJF World Championship, and it only tests black belts who podium. So it's an IQ test, not a drug test. You have to be stupid to get popped. But if you watch ADCC or CJI over the weekend, last weekend, it was full of like roided out freaks. And Craig Jones is one of the most favourite jiu-jitsu guys, and he ran the Craig Jones Invitational. A few years ago, he said, I always try to get the organisers of ADCC during the rules meeting. They have a big rules meeting before the event with every athlete and coach there to say, and also we're going to drug test, just as a joke.
Yeah.
And then he wanted to, for CJI, drug test just as a joke to show that, like, hey, everyone here is actually on steroids. Because some of them say they're not, but they fly. Or go look at the under 77 bracket where the only people who I'd say aren't on performance enhancing drugs are the ones who wore a t-shirt because they were embarrassed by the look of the guys. But it's a free-for-all. Everyone knows. A lot of them are going to die early, and a lot of them have terrible skin and look like they're old leather handbags and stuff like that, because that's what performance-enhancing drugs does to you. It ruins your skin. If you go to any PED doctor, or not doctor, clinic, they will also have skin consultants there, because they know. But if tennis wants to pretend they're a drug-free kind of thing, then they should just be have no drug testing. I mean, if they want to pretend that they're like this whole thing with Sinner, they just should have no drug testing. They should just make it a free-for-all. Because it's nonsense. It's bullcrap. He should have been suspended.
And of course, Nick Kyrgios, who's the moral arbiter, has come out against Sinner. All of a sudden, we're looking to him for moral guidance on everything now. He's just trying to stay relevant.
Yeah. Well, then, because one of the rumoured reasons that IBJJF puts steroid testing or performance-enhancing drug testing is because they want to get jiu-jitsu into the Olympics. That's one of the rumoured reasons, right? But then China had a whole bunch of doping cheats that the Olympic Committee knew about in this year's Olympics.
Yeah, well,
23 of them or something failed drug tests.
The one who beat Kyle Chalmers by over a second. Hello.
It was like 23 of them.
Yeah.
Popped within the last 2 years, and the international swimming didn't suspend.
Yeah, one by over a second in the 100 metres freestyle. Against Kyle Chalmers.
All of these organisations are kidding themselves. There's a whole thing about how in the UFC or in MMA everyone is on steroids. They just know how to rot the system. And I think I've said before, Cheeto Vieira said it on Joe Rogan's podcast, you can pay a guy $20,000 and he'll take you up into the mountains in Mexico on donkey back and do your training camp there, and there's a fully fit out gym, and they'll just pump you full of PEDs. And USADA, or now whoever, it's a Clean Sports or whatever, who do the testing for UFC, can't get up there. No one will take them up there. That's part of the shtick, So you can go up there, and then
that's interesting.
There's also
so they go up there, and there's no stopping them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so they go up there for a 6-month training camp. They pump themselves full of steroids for 3 months, and then for the next 3 months they clean.
They're undetectable.
Yeah, and so it's the same. That's the same big rumor.
There's only so much that can be done, right?
There's the same big rumor about the Dagestanis, where they train in a mosque because you're not allowed to be tested at church, and so when they get a fight, they just go and stay in the mosque, in the mountains of Dagestan. And again, USADA can't get up there; they can't test them. So that's the whole thing. Like, everyone thinks there's so much. Everybody on. I always say, everybody in my favourite sports are on PEDs, except for the people that I know and the players that I like. But
it's like they say, the only difference between Olympic athletes and actors is with the actors, that they're acting, right?
But that's the thing, right? All these sports want to be so, honest and shouldn't take PEDs, and then they let people off. Just stop. Just give up then and just go, all right, guys, it's fine. Because, with the UFC, or actually not UFC is not a good example, I guess. Say with the rugby league, actually, and AFL, we had the whole PED scandal and they all got suspended for a week. Like, they at least did something about it, all right? But then when you have the sporting organisation covering it up, making up nonsense, still allowing the player to play. They just don't want to strip him of a Grand Slam. They
don't want the embarrassment of having to strip him of the Australian Open title that he won earlier this year.
That's fully what it is. Yeah. That's all they want. And so
if he hadn't have won the Australian Open title, they probably would have banned him because, there's no embarrassment because he hadn't won anything before.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's such bullshit. Anyway, the other thing that starts this week is the Paralympics.
Yes, Thursday morning, the opening ceremony is on. cash rewards are on the cards for our Paralympic athletes. Australia is sending 160 athletes to the Paralympics, where they'll compete in 17 sports. Sports Minister Annika Wells has announced that gold medalists will be awarded $20,000, silver medalists $15,000 and bronze medalists $10,000. It's the same amount that Olympic medal winners were paid. She said confirmation of the medal payments, which were first issued at Tokyo in 2021, would be a timely boost for athletes ahead of the opening ceremony in Paris. So
that's awesome. I love the fact that the countries pay their medalists. I hate the fact that the Olympics don't pay the competitors.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly all for this. Obviously, the Paralympic athletes would have, a lot of ongoing costs associated with...
Really funny thing about it, that $20,000 sounds like a lot, but there was like the Filipino medalists that got paid like $1 million or whatever. Like other countries are overpaying. Or maybe Singapore, I can't remember. So one country was paying their Olympic athletes $1 million for a gold.
Yeah, certainly all for that, all for these athletes being paid.
That's one of the things, like, actually... The Olympics is a multi-billion-dollar thing. Yes, there's a lot of people that compete, but the Olympics doesn't pay the athletes anything. $0. It's kind of coming out now that people are realizing it's actually like a bit of a scam, because the city that hosts it has to invest billions of dollars in hosting it for the revenue. What is it called? The broadcasters pay the Olympic Committee for the right to broadcast. The countries pay the athletes to go there, and many of the athletes self-fund. So what is the outlay of the Olympics? What do they pay? Who do they pay? What are their costs?
This is a problem. I mean, if you're an athlete in Australia, you go... Is it really worth my while to go to the Olympics, or is it more worth my while to become an NRL or an AFL player? If you're an American, do you go, is it really worth my while to go in the Olympics, or is it more worth my while to play American football? I mean, what are you going to do?
What do you get out of
What's the incentive out of going to the Olympics?
The Olympics is such a massive scam because, they don't have any outlay. They don't have to advertise. People pay them for the right to use their... Was it Paris 2024 they trademark? The Olympic people, that's their costs. The trademarking of words. So people are kind of cottoning on to how much of a scam it is now, and I think we might see some... That's what I think we've talked about before, like people don't want to bid for the events anymore. Countries don't want to bid for the events.
It costs too much money.
And it seems like the Olympics are the only people who make money.
It costs a lot of money for the country who hosts it, and it's tainted. You don't know how many of the gold medals handed out are legitimate.
Well, 23 of the Chinese swimmers ones are. Yeah.
Well, we know the one that Kyle Chalmers didn't get was tainted.
That's it for the week. We'll get some more US Open updates next week. Yes. The Paralympic updates, and obviously leading into the finals. AFL finals are set, so there's no AFL this week. Forgot about that. No AFL this week, and then Swans will play GWS next week in a Sydney derby because they've both finished top 4. So
yeah, that'll be very interesting. AFL finals coming up. I still don't know about that, how they have the week off before the finals, because if you're in the top 4 and you win again, do you risk being underdone going into that next finals game? But anyway, should be interesting with the Swans and the Giants. I think there's going to be a mad rush to get tickets to that 100%. One as well. Yeah.
So don't forget to follow @SmartB app on social, and we'll see you all next week. Bye, Dan.
Thanks, John. See you then, mate.
Bye, producer Chairs.